In today's video, you will keep learning 15 words with their characters.
See these characters here? After watching today's video, you will be able to recognize and read all of them. Not just that, you will know how to type them into your computer. Of course, you will need the lessons 1 to 6, but still, it's a big day today.
And if you want to know why I keep saying 15 Chinese words with their characters instead of counting them as 20 characters, you should keep watching. Because today, I'm going to explain the difference between a Chinese word and a Chinese character. Hi, this is Chi from Deepling, a channel that makes Chinese easy. If you're new here, this is a place where you can learn Chinese as easily as possible as a beginner and for free. Because I've made it my mission to make Chinese as easy as possible and as available as possible. So if you're one of them, if you're learning Chinese, especially as a beginner, subscribe to follow all the courses that I publish every week for free.
After having learned lessons 1 to 6, you can now fluently translate and understand over 100 Chinese sentences with 40+ vocabulary. What now will happen is you will learn all the characters so that you can finally read and type Chinese. Here at Deepling, we separate the spoken and written part to make sure you master one part first before you move on to the next.
I've explained this very thoroughly in my first video. You can watch that for a deeper understanding. And if you're enjoying this video, please give me a thumbs up. That would motivate me a lot.
Now you've encountered the most interesting and challenging part, the Chinese characters. Most people count the Chinese characters as the basic unit when learning Chinese. So when learning a word, let's say 春天, they count them as 2 characters. But in fact, you just learned one word, spring. If you count spring as 2 characters, you would mistake a character for a word. A character is not a word and does not always have a meaning. It is only a word root. Only words have meanings. Of course, I'm simplifying, but this is the only way to explain if you do not want to first learn Latin to make a comparison here.
Just to be clear, the Chinese native speakers do count characters. That's because they're native speakers. They no longer need to learn the vocabulary. Most of the time, they know how to use these words. And most of the time, they are just learning how to document this language. But for you, somebody who's still learning Chinese as a foreign language, it's essential to understand that characters are not vocabulary.
So what's the difference between a Chinese character and a Chinese word? In Chinese, the most often case is 2 characters build one word. But there are also single characters that work as a word as well. In our last lesson, we learned words such as 美, beautiful, 好, good, 贵, expensive, 远, far, 近, close. They are all words with single characters, but not every single character can work as a word. In fact, in most cases, a Chinese word typically consists of 2 characters, such as 春天, 天气, 学校. If you separate one word that consists of 2 characters into 2 words and try to understand the meaning of each character, in most cases, you can't really tell what each character means literally anymore. Let me use English as the comparative object. Characters in Chinese are mostly like word roots in English. Sometimes word roots could work as single words, such as small, talk, man, kind, dry, clean. But you can also combine them as new words, such as small talk, mankind, dry clean. These words are called compounds. But not every word root can be combined with other words. And very often, you cannot separate them because they cannot work alone. Examples are pre, ism, shen, ti, ness, etc. Learning word roots in Chinese would be like learning these elements exclusively without the words. Would you start learning English with shen without learning multiple words such as nation, portion, motion, position, etc. first?
And this is exactly what happens when most people start to learn the Chinese characters. They strongly believe that each single character has a complete and sole meaning that they can and must remember.
Let's take an example from last lesson, lesson 7. In case you haven't noticed, there were 4 words in lesson 7 that consist of 2 characters, of which you didn't learn the characters separately. They are 天气今天春天学校 If you were learning Chinese from anybody else, this would be how you'd normally learn. 学 means learn, but also method or knowledge. 天 means sky, but also day or days. 今 means today, but also now. 气 means air, but also smell or anger. And this goes on and on for each character here. No, this is not what you did with me. You only learned the words weather, today, spring, and school. Because they are the words that really mattered. What each character means varies in different contexts because they are roots. They only gain a certain meaning if you put them into a word. So the basic unit has to be words and not roots. Generally speaking, 气 mainly means air. But you didn't learn the word air. You learned the word weather, which is 天气. Then you might ask, what does 天 mean? And generally speaking again, it mainly means sky. But then you learned the word 春天 and 今天. There, 天 means day or days. And I could now go on with 春天 or 今天 again, and you might ask, what does 今 mean? This could go on and on forever. This process is just like starting English with learning word roots such as shen. Now imagine you've just learned shen is a form to express something as a noun. Explanation on the internet would be forming nouns of action, condition, etc., such as completion, relation. Now imagine you've just learned the word action. You learned act and shen. Would you separate act and shen at the very beginning? Would you then list all possible words that end with shen, such as nation? And also presume that ne is a verb and indicates something as building a nation? Though it sounds ridiculous, this is what most people do with Chinese when it comes to characters. That's why I only teach words and their characters. I do not teach single characters without contexts. That's also why I mentioned 15 words with their characters at the beginning of this video. I strongly suggest that you do the same. Learn the words first. Forget what single characters mean or, to be exact, can mean. Even though there are the same characters there. Learn the words first as basic units. And with time, you will realize the recurring characters share similar meaning. And then you can learn the single characters after you've learned enough contexts.
What you shouldn't do is to start with single characters, because in doing so, you really believe you've learned one character and you know what it means until you learn the next word in another combination. And here, what happens very often is that this character means something different this time. And then you have to remember this meaning in this combination. And with time, it happens to almost a half of all characters that you've learned. And it becomes really, really frustrating for you because you no longer know what is what.
Which happens to most Chinese beginners, and this is what I want to avoid. With this being said, let's now dive into the next 15 words with their characters.
This is the continuation of Lesson 7, and the activity remains the same. So if you haven't learned Lesson 1 to 6, this is the time that I'm asking you to stop here and go back to Lesson 1 to first learn the spoken language before you can now learn the written language. And if you're asking what is the spoken language and what is the written language and why they work this way, this is the time that I'm asking you to stop also to watch the first video to understand how our method works and why it works that way.
Now, let's finally get started. The first time is always about building a connection between the pronunciation and these Chinese characters. Look at these Chinese characters and try to remember their pronunciation. Again, if there is one word written in pinyin that you do not understand in English, it's a sign to repeat the lessons 1 to 6. 很 公园 芒果 德国 牛奶 辣椒 电视电影高兴伤心爸爸妈妈工作电脑房子公司 Now it's getting a bit more challenging. This time, you will not hear anything. Test yourself. Can you pronounce them all? You will see the characters, but you will not hear the pronunciation. Write the pronunciation down. After you've finished, you will see the answers.
And here, I must emphasize one thing. Please do not aim for perfection. Don't set a goal 100% correctness at your first try, because that's really unnecessary. If you think 50% is a realistic goal at your first try, do it. If you think 10% is realistic, do it as well. Find your pace. Because your only goal is to remember these characters, and these characters are not rocket science. There's nothing that you can't understand here. This process is pure repetition. And as long as you keep memorizing, you can't fail. You will make it work eventually.
Now, check the answers.
Now it's time for the final move. And if you have learned lesson 7, you probably would have already installed the Chinese pinyin input into your device. And if you're having trouble with that, please type 1 in the comment below. If the demand is high, I will make a video instructing how to do it.
You will now hear the pronunciation of the vocabulary again. Type them into Chinese characters. You will see suggestions from your pinyin input software. These suggestions could be right, but also could be wrong. It's you who needs to choose the characters. Type them down wherever you feel comfortable and check the answers afterwards. Compare carefully if the characters are all identical. 很公园芒果德国牛奶辣椒电视电影高兴伤心爸爸妈妈工作电脑房子 公司公司 And here are the answers again. Check if everything was correct.
So that's it for today. Keep practicing until you remember all these characters. After today's lesson, you will be able to type all the 40 sentences you've learned from lesson 1 and 2. I hope this video helped you find a better system to learn Chinese more easily. And if you like this video, please subscribe because together we can make Chinese easy.